Hey guys, welcome to the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Today's episode was recorded a few months ago, and you're going to hear in my conversation with our sweet mom today, Lacey, that she was equal parts anxious and excited for her daughter who would be starting kindergarten. Charlotte did, in fact, start kindergarten, and I want to paint a picture for you. Precious little blonde hair, smocked dress, and large bow to match her very large smile. She is absolutely adorable. Unfortunately, not even 2 weeks into kindergarten, Charlotte began to show signs that something was not okay. An emergency room visit later, and they realized that the lead on her pacemaker had failed, causing Charlotte to need a new one immediately. In August, not even 2 weeks from beginning kindergarten, Charlotte unexpectedly underwent her 7th open heart surgery. Now, she has recovered well. It's been 6 weeks. She returned back to kindergarten last week and to her normal activities of just being a kid. The resilience that this little girl has is remarkable. The faith that her mom and dad have is inspiring. Here's my conversation with my friend, Lacey. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. My guest today is actually a personal friend, and we have gotten to know each other better over the past couple of years. But Lacey, I just want to start by turning the mic over to you. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I am born and raised in Texas in the Katy area. I am married almost 10 years to my high school sweetheart, and we have 2 children, Grant, who is 7, and Charlotte, who is 5. We live in the Fulshire community now. We love it. We have a great support system, family system around us, and we've been navigating for the past 5 years our daughter who has congenital heart disease.
Yeah. And that was why when you and I were chatting via social media, I had asked the question before this season started, hey, moms, what would you like to hear on this season of help my child is or my child has? And you had reached out to me and you were like, hey, I'd love to share about the path that we've been on. And absolutely, because I know that there are other moms out there, and it may not be congenital heart disease, it could be some other chronic illness that you really can speak to what this has been like. So let's jump right into that. How did you, or when was the first time that you realized Charlotte had this disease?
It was at our 20-week ultrasound. So I still thank God every day for that ultrasound tech, because a lot of these times it does not get picked up when they do the anatomy scan at 20 weeks. If you think about it, a child's heart when they are in womb is the size of your pinky fingernail. So to know that all of this was wrong with her heart and it is literally the size of your pinky fingernail is amazing. The next day, we went to a maternal fetal medicine specialist who kind of confirmed that something was not right. And at the time, I was still working and had a close relationship with Texas Children's. And so we knew we needed to transfer our care there to start the process. And so at 24 weeks, we met with a fetal cardiologist at Texas Children's, and then she just laid it all out on the line. I still have the papers from that first appointment where she hand drew a heart and kind of said, this is what's wrong. This is where I think things will go. So from 24 weeks, she was born at 39 weeks. We would meet every 4 weeks and do echoes, ultrasounds, blood work, all of that on both me and Charlotte. And so then when I was delivering, I delivered at Texas Children's. She was straight ready to go into the cardiac ICU units.
Oh my goodness. That is incredible to think how tiny. I mean, you were saying that and I was looking at my pinky fingernail thinking, wow.
And a lot of times, like, they kind of say, okay, we think this is it, but we won't know until she's born, or this might be wrong, but we can't confirm. Our cardiologist was spot on the entire time. When she met us at 24 weeks, she goes, it's this part of congenital heart disease. And that she was accurate. And I mean, she's the best of the best. We adore her. But I mean, to know from that time on that this was the beginning of it.
Golly. Can you share with me what were the emotions and the thoughts when you received this diagnosis? Because you had already had one kiddo. Grant had been
Did.
born, no issues, correct?
Correct. Well, no, he's completely healthy. I had preeclampsia with him and he was 5 weeks early. So at hindsight,
Oh,
I
okay.
look back and I'm like, God prepared me for this, because he was. I didn't get to hold, when he was born, I did not get to hold him. They immediately whisked him back NICU at the
Mhm.
time. And so I just, God completely prepared my heart to know you can handle hard things.
Yeah.
Now this was a lot harder in the grand scheme of things, but still he prepared me for that.
Yeah.
So when we found out, it was a Thursday afternoon, and I remember it was during football season. I think my dad had a JV game. So I went to the game that night. It was normal and kind of that. The next morning we met with a doctor at a different hospital, and that really did scare me, kind of what she did. And I decided to go into work that afternoon. I think just because it was one of those don't think about anything. And I remember my husband went to
Mhm.
an Astros World Series game that afternoon as well. And I was like, why are you going to that? We just heard this news. Like, who knows if she's gonna live? Like it was one of those, and later on he goes, Lacey, I needed to process. That was my processing of 3 hours at a mindless baseball game. And so I did end up telling one girlfriend at work, something's not right. I don't quite know what it is, but we'll figure it out. But then I really shut down. I did not talk about it. I didn't want people asking me how my pregnancy was going because I didn't want to get into it at that time. And I truly never did because we still had the option at that point if we needed to terminate it, if anything like that. And that was obviously never going to be an option of mine, but that was still that kind of that time frame that we were talking about. And so that was from then on, I told a few friends we did have a baby shower, but I remember telling the girls that were hosting, I was like, don't talk about it because I haven't told a lot of these people here. And it was close friends, it was close family, but it just was not something I feel like if I talked about it, I would have to process it more. Talking about what her name was, just because it was so unknown. Like I'd had a name picked out, and then when we found all this, I was like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to
Mm.
think about the nursery. And I knew whatever it was, what God needed to happen, both positive or if something would have happened at birth, I knew He was still going to be in control of it. But it was just in my mind, I didn't want to. I didn't want to think about it.
Sure. Sure. And when they gave you the diagnosis, was it a diagnosis of this can be fixed, or was it a diagnosis of we don't know if she'll live after birth, or was it both? Was it hey, she's got
It
to
was
be
a little
born
both.
for
I
us
think
to
they
know?
prepare you because of the nature of heart disease, and obviously at that time they're unborn. They do prepare you that it might not end great, but we felt very confident in her care and our care at Texas Children's
Hmm.
that we were going to be okay.
Now let's fast forward. She's born. What happens next? They whisk her
She
away to the cardiology unit,
They
and what
do.
happens next?
It was a normal, it's so funny because like for my son, I had to stay at the hospital. Like I was admitted, I was on bed rest for 3 weeks. So like the morning of her C-section, they're just like, okay, show up at 6 a.m. Like, we'll do you. And I'm like, this is really major. Are you sure? And I remember crying the whole time during my C-section. And they asked me what her name was, and I couldn't pronounce it. I couldn't get it out of my mouth. I was crying. And so for the whole month we were in the hospital the first time, it was Lacey's girl, because that's just what they just did, mom and girl. And I was like, I guess I told y'all the wrong name. That's not her name. But I couldn't pronounce, I just couldn't get it out during the C-section. So she was whisked right away. And at that time, I still didn't talk, like when I had to send in our birth announcement for my job, I just said, she's in the cardiac ICU, say prayers. I didn't even want to
Yeah.
talk about what it looked like. But we knew once we were there, her first surgery would be within a week of her being born.
Wow.
So because I was C-section, so I was still recovering in a different tower at Texas Children's, and my husband would stay with her in the cardiac ICU. I will say, I'm thankful we're in Houston. It doesn't matter what hospital you're in, but to know that we're in the best care possible for
Wow.
any problem you will ever need, kid, adult, teenager, this is where you need to be. I'm just thankful for that. So her
Mhm.
first one was at a week old. And just God wings through the whole process. Her surgeon, his dad was the superintendent where my dad went to high school. He was from Texas. Her cardiologist was just, we had little connections here and there. And we just knew we were in the best care possible. And think about it a lot. I didn't realize it during the first surgery, but I started realizing it during the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, that it didn't matter what I thought. It didn't matter how scared I was, how nervous I was, how anxious I was. None of my feelings were going to change being in that hospital, because I felt safe in there. And I felt safe because of the doctors, but I felt safe because God put me in those situations. Like, yes, I cry when they take her back to the operating room, but there's a sense of peace.
Mhm.
Those white walls, those white hallways, it's a sense of peace. And I know it's a sense of God, obviously, being in that place at that moment.
Mm. That's powerful. That is powerful. And it's such an act of surrender. I mean, you have been thrust. Let me back up. A lot of times as moms, you have a healthy child and life goes as normal. And then maybe when they're a little bit older, they begin to have struggles or they get an illness that, gosh, they've got a really high fever, or, you jump into junior high or high school, they make a decision that it is dangerous for them, or, they're in an accident. All the scenarios that I think as moms, we get thrust into trusting God completely.
Mhm.
But you, at 20 weeks pregnant, were literally thrust into every moment with this child. From this moment forward is a complete act of surrender in a huge way that a lot of parents, actually, some go completely unscathed for most of their kids' lives and don't have to surrender to this level that you have had to surrender to. And so she has now had, she's 5. How many surgeries has she had to date?
To 6.
6. Okay, 6 surgeries and all open heart,
All
major
open
surgeries.
heart, all heart-lung bypass machines, so where they stop her heart for a good few hours in the operating room. We've had a few what they call cath lab procedures as well, but I kind of don't. To me, sometimes I'm like, "I'm going to cath lab, no big deal." Your chest stays closed and all that. But yes, so 6
Yeah.
complete open hearts.
Okay, and so how has your family coped with the challenge? I mean, she's 5. That's
She's fine.
more, she's had more surgeries than the years she's been alive. So how does your family cope with these multiple surgeries?
So I would say maybe fortunately they've all been in pockets. So like the first 2 were within 3 months of each other. The 3 and 4 were within 2 weeks of each other. And then 5 and 6 were probably within 3 months of each other as well. From the biggest standpoint, our son is, he knew we had appointments kind of before she was born. He knew he was 2 at the time. And so he didn't really truly understand what a new baby sister would be. But from the moment she was on, when we were in the ICU, he came up. And I'm fortunate that was pre-times that people could come to the hospital because I
Mhm.
needed him to see the machines, the ICU beds, all of the wires on her because, yes, it was probably scary and
Mm.
people are like, "Are you sure?" But I was like, he needed to know that because we have had instances since then, if there's an emergency where I'm like, "Everybody get in the car, we need to go to the doctor, no questions asked." And he understands that sense of, okay, something's happening. I need to do what she says. And so I think
Yeah.
exposing him to that
Mhm.
was something I will never regret. And I think it also now he takes on a protective nature of her. There's a lot of things she can't do. She can't go on a trampoline. She can't go in a bouncy house. So if he thinks she's going to try and do that, he'll deter her. He'll come tell me. He'll be like, "Sissy, let's go do something else," because he doesn't want to
Oh.
put her in danger either. And so for me, that's my biggest advice for anyone going through anything with a separate sibling is involve all of the other ones as much as you can.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great advice. Because, like you said, it could be really scary, but it's not scary to him because it's part of his life too, and he's aware. What advice would you give? We've got a mom listening that's maybe pregnant or is in the same situation. What advice would you give to a mom that's facing similar challenges? Like, how do you take care of you amidst all of this?
First, I would say, it's going to be okay. And okay might not look the same as okay did for me. You're okay maybe is one surgery and you're done. You're okay maybe might be that they do pass away, but you then get to use that as your ministry moving forward.
Mhm.
I would say I Googled a little bit, but I got scared and I stopped. But I think I did it enough for me to be like, okay, there's some good things and there's some bad things, and I'm gonna let the doctors tell me the rest. There's an a natural instinct as a human to be like, okay, tell me everything I need to know, and I need to know this right now. But I remember like reading some stats, and it was like, okay, their rate of survival at this age is this, and this age is this, and it was like something at like if what their survival rate was at when they were age 50, and it was very low. But I'm also like, okay, it's gonna be fine. She'll make it past 50. She'll have kids and grandkids. I think, and then educate yourself and then surround yourself. I have been fortunate that there's probably 2 or 3 other moms in Houston that I would say similar lifestyles as similar sibling ages that I have been able to reach out to and be like, "Hey, let me know your thoughts. We're going skiing in 2 weeks and it's hard. It's a lot harder on a heart baby than it is a normal person. But I have a friend that has one. And I called her last week and I said, okay, I need all the tips and tricks. Tell me exactly this and this. And so now on the flip side, I have tried to be that person. I've gone to lunch with a few moms that are just starting this journey, and none of our journeys look the same. You'll never meet someone that is 5 years old and they've had 6 surgeries and they've done exactly the same thing, but we're all staying in a hospital. We're all going through the same emotions at the end of the day. And so I would say find a circle of friends that you can trust that are within that community of whatever your issue is. If it's allergies are huge. If it's
Right.
something with cancer, if it's heart related, just find your community
Mm.
because they're going to be the ones that understand you the most.
Right. And if you were looking back, is there any key lessons or I guess perspectives that you wish someone would have told you earlier in the journey?
I honestly liked going into it a little naive. It came up last week was the anniversary of her first. It was her so it's been 5 years since her very first surgery. I remember what we ate for lunch that day, in the waiting rooms. I remember thinking like, "Done, that was easy." It was a 10-hour surgery. He was great. He said it's good, like moving on, no more for a long time. And then it was obviously a very large wake up call 3 months later when we had to go back to surgery. So I honestly, I shut down a lot. I don't know if that's the best option, but the naiveness of it, I think saved me a little bit for that first surgery because I did not have that mixed anxiety for the first one because I didn't know what to expect. And I was like, we're fine. We're great. It's going to be all, hunky dory. We're going to live our life normal. And then again, when that second one came, I was like, oh, maybe not. And then third one came, that's when she got a pacemaker. So she is completely pacemaker dependent now as well. And that's probably been the hardest part for me to grasp of everything is knowing her heart is solely dependent on a pacemaker.
And how old was she? Okay, so surgery number one, she was a week old, you said, and it was 10 hours.
Yeah.
I cannot even fathom that, Lacey. A week-old baby being in a 10-hour surgery. It's just, I mean, what a little warrior. Like the strength that the determination she has to be like, this is not my story. Like, I'm going to do just fine with this. But then how old was she when the decision was made? She has to be pacemaker
So her
dependent.
second one was when she was 3 months old. And then her third one, it was June. So she was a little less than a year and a half. And when you sign on papers of these things could go wrong during a procedure, pacemaker was one of those things I signed for. So she went into complete heart block during the surgery. So it means the top part and the bottom part of her heart do not communicate. And so
Okay.
there's a hope during kind of that recovery process, it would kind of fix itself and kind of come back, but hers did not. And so then that fourth one was a week and a half later to place her permanent pacemaker.
Okay. Let's back up. I probably should have asked this earlier on. What exactly is her heart disease? What's happening in her heart?
Schoen's complex. So it's where the left side of her heart has not fully developed.
Okay.
And so you're always fixing abnormalities on the left side of the heart. So the pacemaker was not a result of her initial diagnosis, but it was a result from a surgery of her initial diagnosis.
Okay. Okay. And so that was unexpected. You had signed off on it, but that wasn't really the end goal at that point.
And that was also June of 2020. My husband dropped Charlotte and I off at the bottom of the hospital floor and said, "I'll see you when we pick you up." I would prefer wish that experience on a single soul. I still get so choked up thinking about it. I mean, literally, it was like 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, and he was like, "Okay, I'll see you later." So it was just her and I. And that one was probably a 15-hour surgery just because of the kind of when they've realized about the pacemaker issue. And he could not come up the entire time we were there.
You sat in that hospital alone for 15 hours.
And I was in there alone for 2 weeks because we stayed in the hospital, and then we had to recover once they did her pacemaker surgery as well.
And what a scary time of the year June of 2020, nobody wants to be in a hospital, much less in a hospital with a baby and a baby with a heart condition. I mean, I'm sure that the protocols and the protection measures were through the roof.
And They were, he could not come up because it could only be one parent that was there the entire time.
Yeah.
And like, you really could, it was lonely. I mean, truly, because like, if you've been in any hospital, kind of on that waiting room floor, on the food floor, like it's always hustling and bustling. You see the doctors coming in and out, you see families and it was, I would just sit by myself because they had tables marked off, you could only sit, I would sit by myself and it's lonely because there's just no one. Can't even like people watch. It was just so
Right. The mindless
lonely.
people watch. This isn't not to compare at all, but my mother they were living here and she had broken her hip in February of 21. And so we were still under COVID precautions, and she has Alzheimer's. And so when they took her from the nursing home that she was living in, of course, they would not let me go with her. And it was in the middle of the freeze that we had in February where it was not safe for me to drive. It was not safe for me to get to her. And then there was no way I was getting on an interstate. And they actually took her to a much further hospital because the hospital closest to us, there had been so many people falling through their roof because of leaks and they were going up to check. People slipping on ice. They said there were just people lined up in the hallways on beds. So they look at me, they're taking my mom who has no cognitive ability to know what's happening to her. And they're saying, hey, we're taking her to this hospital because that hospital had lost electricity. And they said, but the generators will be coming up. And the EMTs were like, we're going to take a shot that by the time we get there, the power will be back on and she'll be one of the first patients so they can at least get some pain relief. And that was on a Tuesday night. They would not, of course, let me go in and see her. And then she had to have hip replacement Friday morning. And they called me and they said one person can come in. And whoever comes in during the surgery will be the only person allowed in during the recovery. And so I totally can relate to what you're saying because I sat there while my mom was in surgery and there was nobody. It was like no man's land. And you just kind of want to look across at another smiling face, or you want to see the doctor come out and talk to another family and their surgery was successful. And it at least gives you some sort of connection to humanity, right? And so I cannot even imagine being in there with a baby and with such a severe diagnosis and hours upon hours of surgery alone. I'm so sorry that you had to face that. I can imagine I'm getting emotional for you. So you've been through a lot, Mom. This is not an easy story. What ways, Lacey, have you grown personally through this experience?
Probably positive and negative. I feel like I've become more independent in it. And sometimes it's, okay, like that, where I was 2 weeks completely on my own. I wasn't great about sharing things. Like, my husband, like, okay, what's the update now? Or what's the update? And in my mind, I'm just processing it all myself right there. We're focusing on that. I'm focusing on her. So I definitely did become more independent, but it's now I'm kind of trying to like work backwards from that of, okay, I can share more now. I can talk about that. But for me at that time, I was like, I'm keeping everything right here in my chest, my heart. So it's a double, but now I'm seeing the other side of it. Yes, you have a whole lot of independence and you can fight like heck through a hospital, but you also need to let others in on that process too. And again, it's a trusting God nature. And I don't practice, let me first admit, I don't necessarily practice this on all aspects of my life. I'm not there, but this is one thing where like, see God, like you got it. I'm gonna just sit back. So I do want to work on that on other avenues of my life too, of just mundane day-to-day task of trusting him. Because I think something so big, of course, like it's a lot easier to trust God on bigger issues. From my personal experience, where okay, get them to school safely, teach them, make sure they're learning the right things at school. You kind of forget that God's still in control of all of that too.
Do you think a little bit of it is, though, because this is such a big issue with Charlotte, that it is beyond you? Like, this is something that is beyond you, where fixing their lunch, driving them to school, you have more control over. And so it's almost opposites. Like the big stuff, you're like, I have no control over this. So you know what? I can trust you, God. But then the things that we can control, or we think we can control, it's okay. Hey, God, I've got this.
Yeah.
I've got this portion of it. But we like to feel a little bit like we have some control and we have some say. And
I can make a mean peanut butter and jelly sandwich every day for lunch, but I sure as heck can't go back into an operating room. And just those kinds of things. You
Right.
trust him in all aspects to put the right people in your life at the right times.
Yeah, that's good advice. How has this journey shaped, though, your outlook as a whole in motherhood?
For a while, I would get annoyed when I would see friends like, "Oh, my baby didn't sleep through the night. I'm so tired." Or like, "Oh, no, we have a cold. We can't do this." I would get annoyed. I'd be like,
Sure.
bigger picture, there's a whole lot other things going on. And that's for anyone. I mean, I have a friend that her little daughter went through cancer. And I'm like, sometimes your hospital stays were a lot longer than mine at times. And you did go through a whole
Right.
different set of challenges. And so I think that kind of I stopped focusing on the small things. Like we have a busted chin. I'm not promoting that. There's just different things where I change my outlook on what's important at the moment.
Correct. I could totally understand that. Now, let's shift over to Grant. You mentioned a little bit earlier that he has been witness to this from the very beginning. You have not hid this from him. It has made him more aware of sister's needs. But how have you navigated caring for him? Because you're so needed for her. How have you balanced being mom and present for him and it not being scary for him? Let's talk a little bit more about that because I know that there's people listening that are like, Look, I can totally identify. I mean, with the 6 children, but I have had one that has required more of me emotionally. It's been more difficult emotionally and spiritually, and I can totally see where there were times through the past 15 years that mom shut down because mom was either so hurt, so worried, so stressed, so sad because of a situation. And I know that my other 5 have felt that, mom's not okay. And hey, I want everybody to hear it's okay for mom to not be okay
Yeah.
sometimes, right? My husband actually does a really good job, and I bet yours does as well, when mom needs a hot minute, being like, hey, it's okay. Mom's not okay, but she will be. So, how
Yeah.
have you navigated that with him? Because he's very young too.
Yes. Before every surgery or hospital stay, fortunately, 2 of them have been semi-emergency, but we've at least had a day or 2 to prepare for that. But, like, I always, before every stay, will make him a care package. So, like, they've been during the summer, so I'll get him a new water football. I'll get him new pool toys. We are fortunate. My parents do live right around the corner. So it's been we've never had to worry about him in those situations of, like, when I am away and when Logan could be away with us too. But I
Mhm.
try and, spoil him, I would say, on the front end and say, "I can't wait to see you using all these new cool toys or, playing in the street with your friends." Trying to do that. He would come, either Logan would bring him or my mom would bring him up to the hospital, just like into the driveway where I'd come down for 15 minutes
Mm.
and maybe we would drive to, and if you, time out. If you are in the medical center, stop by Tiny Box. So stop by Tiny's number 5. They have the best chocolate chip cookies, the best food ever. That's like
Okay.
every time we go to the hospital, I'm like, everyone go to Tiny's. It's in Westview. But so we would go get a treat every time we would do that. So
Mhm.
I would still make sure that even though I was not home for 2 weeks, someone would let him come to
Mm.
just the driveway of the hospital to see him. And then now intentionally, I mean, there was, I guess, 2 years ago, the Astros were in the World Series. I think it
Mm.
was World Series. And we had just gone out of the hospital. It was an October surgery. And I called my husband. I was like, "I'm sorry, I'm buying World Series tickets. I'm taking Grant. Don't ask me a
Mm.
question. Don't decline it. We're going to the game tonight." Because he loves the Astros. And for
Yeah.
me, I was like, "I've been away for you for a week. The best I can give you right now is a full night doing what you want to do."
Mm.
And so I would say, I mean, obviously my husband's super supportive of that and those type of situations, but it's still trying. And it's in any child with anything. They say the birth of a child, it's you still need to focus on the second one or the third one or whoever. So it's
Mhm.
using that, but also knowing that is going to be continual for the rest of our lives in the situations. And again, I remember when I found out Charlotte was a girl, everyone's, "Oh my God, you're so lucky. You have one of each." And I was like, "That's great." I just come off Grant's pregnancy where I was not healthy at the end. I'm like, I want
Mm.
to make it full term, have a great pregnancy. But in my opinion, I still look at it as it's a godsend because with her pacemaker, she can't play contact sports. She can't do a lot of the more strenuous things. And I would not want to explain to her and to him, "Hey, sorry, you can't go play football," or "Sorry, you can't go do this that your brother's doing," because those are things. And so, I mean, again, I still look at that as, again, another God
Yeah.
putting those 2 people in my life at the times that they came.
Mhm, mhm. And you're being intentional with him. You're knowing, okay, I need to be, which we should do despite if we
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
kiddo with an illness or whatever. But, whenever we were having all these babies back to back, we would do something similar with, moms going into the hospital. And then, of course, new baby would bring a little present to each one of the kids. And after, after they had a few siblings, they were really more excited about what the baby was bringing than the baby. They were like, there's another one. What's she or he bringing me this time? But it's just making those intentional dates, like you said, though, that he will look back and say, hey, my sister was sick or my sister had a lot of surgeries, but my mom and dad always made sure to make time for me. And that goes back to the community that you have. If you're listening and you're living in an area that maybe mom and dad aren't available or aren't close, there are people in your community or within your church that would step up and be there for you. And that goes back to just how important community is. Now, let's shift to Charlotte. How have you approached conversations with her about her condition as she grows older?
We're very open with her. She's very
Does
aware. I
she
mean,
understand what's
she
going
does.
on?
She understands enough. She will ask people, she'll like lift up her shirt. I'm like, okay, girlfriend, we got stuff back. But she'll be like,
Okay.
well, where's your pacemaker? And I'm like, okay, baby, not everyone has one of those, those kind of things. And she'll be like, well, this is where my scar is. Where's yours? I'm like, well, they're not ruining that. But she is aware. She's aware that unfortunately there are things that she can't do. We can't go on bouncy houses. We can't go on trampolines. And she's aware enough to be like to her friend, I'm really sorry I can't go on that right now with you. But when you're done, let's go play on something else. So there are definitely things that she's aware of. We're having some, I don't know, I guess you call them issues right now with her pacemaker. She's like, I can feel it. So she knows it's something is there and you can see it and she can definitely feel it. But we have talked about, when she does get older, that there's not a lot of child therapy resources, but we do think it's important that we all see a therapist because it's gonna come up in PE class when she's older. It's gonna come up, in different school settings if she has to miss school for a surgery. And I do
Mhm.
think equipping these children, again, it's the same way we talked with Grant. We're not hiding anything, and I'm not hiding anything from her either because I want her to tell me things. I want her to tell me if something's uncomfortable. I want her to tell me if I'm really tired right now. I just need to take a break. There's things that we need them to communicate with us. So I want to make sure we're always communicating with her. Like when we go
Mhm.
into the doctors, I mean, she's paying attention during her echo. She's paying attention during her x-rays to know these are what they're doing and this is what they're looking at.
And what is the future prognosis? What does it look like moving forward? Do they even know, or are you still on a
We're
kind of
we're kinda
case
it's
by
always a
case?
wait and see, I would say, kind of with her diagnosis, it is. It can things can pop up at any time. There's some heart surgeries where you have 3 and you're done, or there's, you have 1 and it's fixed. Obviously, her pacemaker battery will have to be changed, and eventually, when they get older, they move it up to her collarbone, so it sits in her abdomen right now. So that will obviously always be one, and then she had a valve replacement. Her last surgery was a valve replacement, so will obviously have to have one of those when she outgrows the one that they were able to put in, for her as
Mhm.
well. So, no, it will never be out of the woods, but this stretch has been nice to not be there, and it gives us some normalcy, and sometimes we kind of, I wouldn't say forget, but there'll be, like, a day or 2 goes by, you're outside giving her medicine daily and things like that, that you're kinda like, "Oh, you're a normal child," and we definitely try and treat her as such when possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm going to close this out with I want you just to share just a few moments that you can recall where you clearly have seen God show up from that 20-week ultrasound to where you are today. Where has he shown up in this journey with you and Charlotte?
One of the most prominent things that always stays on my head, I had joined a new Bible study the summer of 2020. So, I mean, I was so fortunate that this Bible study was continuing. We did it outside, which you have to be devoted to do a Bible study in June and July in Houston. Um, and I just remember this, and it was all brand new girls to me, but they completely took me in. And one of the studies we were doing, the Bible verse, and it's kind of one that has stuck with me for it. It's Romans 2 through 5. And I'll read it real quick
Yeah.
because then it really explains how I set the tone for what we did moving forward. But we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. And so that was the Bible verse. That was that was June of 2020. So that was kind of going into, to me, the darkest and the hardest struggles of her. But it's one of those of God's not going to make you do something that he knows you cannot do, and he knows that he cannot carry you through. And so that's always been kind of what's stuck in my head. We had an issue with a preschool not wanting to accept her, which was a whole
Interesting.
different story. That one might cause some wine. It broke my heart because I was like, she's no different. I just said, don't put magnets by her stomach and, don't let her jump on the trampoline if y'all have one. But we moved to a different preschool, and it's been a blessing. But the first week it was talking about how God made us all wonderfully. You're all wonderfully made. And it was just kind of one of those, I get to. I cried because I'm like, I was like, she's 4 years old and you're discriminating, you're doing all these things.
I'm actually shocked to hear that.
It was, yeah.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that
I
off
won't say
camera.
names, but it was one that our older son went to. We loved. We stayed there because of the teacher. They had a director change, and it just didn't fit their agenda to try something different. So we did. We moved one. It's 2 minutes from our house now. It's a blessing. But I remember that was the Bible verse the first week of school. And it was one of those things. It was God saying, I know that sucked for, a week trying to figure out where you were going to put her, and you had your mind on that. But she's going to be okay. We're all going to be okay right here.
Yeah. He had chosen a better place. You just had to get to it. Yeah. And I'm sure that is difficult. That moment of, you've got this daycare that's rejecting your daughter because she has something special and she needs special attention. And it's probably, again, it's going to be one of those things in hindsight that you look back and you go, I'm glad that I had that moment when she was 4 and I worked through it, because then you saw the fruit of God saying, I have something better in store for her. Because there's going to be other times that there's going to be a rejection, and she herself will feel it, as she gets older, and maybe she wants to participate in something that her heart will not allow her to participate in. You can see those steps where he's preparing you for, it may not be this, but it's going to be something better. Yep. Wow. What a story of endurance. And just, you can tell just talking to you that this is not an easy story, but you have such peace and strength despite the challenges. And so I close every show asking our moms, is there something that you're praying for right now? And I think this is the verse that you wanted to share with us. But so repeat the verse for us. And then is there something that we can join you in praying for right now?
Sure. So one of the verses that I do always go back to, it's Romans 2:5. We rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. I think a direct prayer request is she'll go into kindergarten in the fall. So first, for a mama, sending her last one to kindergarten is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I'm putting her in somebody else's care 5 days a week for 8 hours. Yes, she's been in a little Mother's Day out for a few days, but that now we get the bigger kids at school. We get the playground equipment that she can't always be on. So I think that's kind of what I'm like, so she's so excited to go to kindergarten. I'm so excited for her, but there's just so much in the back of my head of, okay, we have to get this ready. And I need to make sure your teachers always say you can't go on the monkey bars. And do we trust the nurse? We are very fortunate. It's a great nurse at the school. It's a great principal at the school that we do have personal relationships with. So I do feel very happy about that, but it is causing a lot of anxiety. Just
Sure.
you're sending them off to some, it's no different than sending them to junior high and sending them to high school and sending them to college and sending them off to get married. There's always, as a mom, those are always the steps. But this one, there's just a few more little caveats and divots in it.
For sure. And I can totally understand how that would make you, just a little bit more anxious. And then now you're back in the white walls of the hospital saying, okay, God, I've got to completely trust you with this next step in her growth and in her development. And so I think that just knowing you personally based on your faith and what he has already brought you through. It's going to feel a little anxious, but then you've got us in your Bible study group. We'll be crying and praying with you. We've got you, girl. We've got you. My goodness. Lacey, it's been so fun to chat with you about this. I just appreciate you sharing your story, and that's another thing about this story, your willingness to say, hey, I've been there. This is scary. This is anxiety ridden. But you can find peace and strength in knowing that God has got you is so important. And I love that she's just raising her shirt and she's showing everybody. I hope that she's not doing that in 6th grade and beyond. But, she's going to be raising her voice she will have such a testimony to help other kids who maybe feel different or have the same issues. And you're teaching her that. You are setting the example right now of, hey, your story may look different, but your story is beautiful and we're going to share it because it helps somebody else. So the community that you needed, you are building. And I'm so appreciative that you're willing to do that. So thank you so much for being with me.
Perfect. I appreciate you having me on. And I hope that this is helpful to other parents going through something medically, whether it is something at birth they found out about or, when they're 2 or 3 years old, whether it be allergies, whether it be cancer, whether it be a heart disease, but they do find hope in knowing they can find a community or they can build. If they can't find one, then I hope they build one and they could be successful and heartwarming to other mamas as well.
Yeah, that's so important. Thanks so much, sweet friend.
Thank you.
One of the things that I wanted to share with you is that in the spring of 2023, Charlotte's Coupe Club was established as a way to give back to Texas children's in memory of Charlotte's great-grandfather and through Charlotte's love of cruising the halls in a coupe car. Through this program, Texas Children's Hospital has bought over 10 new cars and 4 medical-grade wagons. As Charlotte was a patient recently, she was able to drive around in her Ladybug car while recovering from surgery. If you are interested in donating to Charlotte's Coupe Club, there will be a link in today's show notes. Thanks so much for listening to The Mom Show with Courtney Doyle. Remember to check the show notes for any links, books, or resources that are mentioned in each episode. We want to be sure this blesses other mothers, and in order to do this, if you're listening via podcast, be sure that you like and share. If you could write a review, that would be fantastic. It helps us get in front of other moms. If you're watching via YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. This way, you won't ever miss an episode. We want to make sure that we increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.